Hi everyone, this week's lecture is just on your third and final assessment for this course. It will likely be a rather short video, but there is other material you are required to go through before our tutorials, which covers this week's topic, so please make sure you do that before class. The third assessment is an essay that needs to be 1,800 words, but the word count you submit can be plus or minus 10%. It is an individual assessment, and the objective of this task is again designed to get you to really engage with one of the critical questions, or prompts more so, that we're going to go through in this video. So these questions are broadly based in the ideas we have explored about social justice in the natural world. So each question will get you to expand on your understanding of one of these concepts from this course. So on this slide are two of the prompts. There are three more that I will explore on the next coming slides. So please keep that in mind. Don't pause the video here and think these are your only two options for this assessment. So as I go over these question options, I'm going to give general tips for each prompt. So no matter which one you do, I will have some advice attached to them. Please note as well that some of these prompts are, like I said, not exactly questions. They do have questions within them, but they're kind of more so prompts. Prompts, however, still act like questions. You just need to take perhaps more time or another step to consider what the prompt is asking of you, rather than having a really clear question presented to you. What is required of you will become clear as well as you read the rest of the prompt. So part of your assessment, as this goes across disciplines as well, part of your assessment is always to showcase how you approach a task. So don't feel like having a prompt rather than a really clear question is harder or worse to work with, or that you are really limited by these prompt options. I always want to see how you approach tasks. That's why lecturers do not always specify everything about an assessment. We want to see how you do. So these prompts are somewhat open up to interpretation. The first prompt is about the concept that is the power to address climate change lies with the consumer. So drawing on an example of a specific product or type of product you consume that has environmental costs, critically discuss this statement first. Within this prompt, there are then specific questions to consider. So being, what does your own experience in consuming or trying not to consume this product reveal about the role and limitations of individual consumers? For example, or perhaps to consider this question more specifically, what social, cultural, and economic or structural factors impact on your agency and decision making? Or who else is responsible and how? Make sure to bring in scholarship, so for example, that examines how your personal experience does actually reflect or challenge, or maybe even challenge other scholarship on the role and limitations of consumers. So yeah, this leads me to my first bit of advice. Naturally, you can talk about your experience, but as this is an academic essay, you are going to want to support your claims with other evidence. So for example, citing a piece of literature that also claims that the social or economic factor that you are talking about is generally identified as such within literature as well. I want to mention now, I am open for you writing in first person, considering particularly with this prompt, but also with some other prompts. They do kind of indicate or encourage you to share your personal experiences, but we want to make sure you do that in an academic or in a formally written way. So I have included in these slides sources that explain first person writing in academia, and I can go over that in a little bit. You are, however, not required to write in first person. So you can share personal experiences in other ways, for example, stating that in the author's experience, ... or this information reflects the author's experience, and so ... Don't feel like you have to write in first person just because I've made it appropriate for this essay. Environmental costs within this prompt really just mean the product has some impact on the environment. Oftentimes when we make purchases, we do not really consider how the decision will impact the environment or is related to the environment. So this will, I think, require a little bit of deeper thought. It could be a product that is really well known for being impactful, like the fast fashion items, or it could be something that we aren't really seeing discussed too much in more mainstream discourse, like maybe harmful cleaning products or something. The second prompt is, the recent Los Angeles fires have devastated communities and ecosystems. However, media coverage has tended to prioritize the loss of celebrity property and their experiences of losing a sense of home, rather than broader environmental justice concerns. Drawing on 2 to 3 news articles or social media posts by or on celebrities as examples, and a selection of relevant course concepts, so such as climate justice, anthropocentrism, Indigenous perspectives, or degrowth, to analyse how media narratives about the fires construct different forms of loss. For example, you can explore who or what loss is made more visible or invisible, and how these narratives kind of reinforce or perhaps maybe challenge existing inequalities in climate justice debates. This could be really interesting. At least I think I would start by gathering some media and assessing it for any common themes that link to key concepts that we've talked about in this course. It would be interesting to get, I think, a diverse range of media as well, to explore if overall media and celebrities are ignoring the larger problem, or if some are kind of recognizing these larger problems but still nothing is being done about them, and trying to understand why that is, again, why some experiences are made more visible than others. Prompt number 3 is lifestyle changes. For example, zero waste living, veganism, and carbon offsetting are often encouraged as personal strategies for climate or environmental action. Analyze a contemporary campaign that promotes individual solutions, drawing on sections of relevant course concepts and scholarship, looking at both visual and written elements and the audio if relevant for these cases or campaigns. How does the campaign construct the causes and consequences of the problem, as well as the solutions to it? And how does it frame these issues, or the framing of these issues highlight or obstruct environmental justice issues covered in the course? Obscure, it actually says, not obstruct, even though that's kind of same thing. Again, I think you could get really creative with this, and the campaign that you pick for this, if you do this prompt. What I would do, I think, is remind myself of the discourse around individual and system solutions discussed in week 12, and then really search for a campaign that reflects those concepts. And so I could then kind of deep dive into both the concepts and the campaign that I pick. The fourth option is many companies in the in the animal food industry market themselves are ethical, sustainable, and humane, yet independent investigations often reflect different realities. Choosing a specific animal food industry providing product within Australia, this can be meat, dairy, eggs, or seafood. Conduct an independent analysis of farming, production, or labour practices in this industry, and compare and contrast these findings with the selected piece of a brand's marketing material. So perhaps they're advertising, their website, or their packaging. Oftentimes you find their value statements of a campaign are really helpful for analysing and comparing and contrasting that with their practices. Use course concepts to analyse how the campaign, or the company, constructs its public image versus its real world impact. And if I was going to do this prompt, I would research what industry currently is being called out for unethical practices, because sometimes it's not really transparent about what their practices really are. So for example, right now the Bob Brown Foundation is calling out the salmon farms in Tasmania, and they've posted really clear videos of very poor conditions and treatment of the fish. So having, I think, a really clear issue of the farming production or labour practices, I think will just help a lot with being able to describe what it is, how it's a problem, and then apply those concepts to understand it better as a problem. Okay, final option, number 5, is Blanche Verley's article, which was published in 2024, sees the distress and grief many people feel in response to climate change as an issue of justice rather than an individual's pathology. Despite frequent political and corporate gaslighting of climate distress, she argues that it should be harnessed to generate more politically accountable and empowering responses to climate change. Apply the concepts and theories from Verley's work on climate distress to an example of a community that has or is facing climate change-related distress. Which concepts and arguments does she highlight which actually play out in real-world examples, and how? I'm a little bit biased here, I'm not going to lie. I love Blanche's work, and we actually email each other fairly frequently to talk. We're in the same area, so it makes sense. She was even potentially going to be my PhD supervisor, but I wanted to clearly point that out for you, that it's not going to impact my marking if you're a Sydney student and you decide to do this. Because obviously, one, there's a marking rubric, so I objectively have to follow it, and also her work is really up for interpretation as well, so my understanding of it can be very different to yours, and that goes for all of these prompts as well. Don't be intimidated to integrate your interpretations into your assessment, into your essays. There's no right or wrong. You do need evidence to support whatever you claim, but again, essays are kind of designed to be argumentative, so it's fine to include your interpretations. And this is just a great prompt, and if you've naturally been interested in or very understanding of kind of the emotional side of experiencing climate change, I would really recommend you doing this option. Lots of you really lacked that week on disasters, and her concepts could be easily applied, I think, to unlock just another layer of some of those chats that we've already had. So yeah, think about how you could use this prompt to explore something that is meaningful, not just in a theoretical way, but how it could really unpack people's experiences as well. Apart from selecting one of the mentioned options, there are some important things that this essay does need to achieve, and I'll just quickly run through them now. So this essay must be on a different topic to the one that you did for your second assessment with your group. It must be well researched, with at least 7 relevant sources being discussed and cited. It of course must be thoughtfully done, so part of that aspect requires you to kind of, like I've said, interpret those prompts, be thoughtful about your approach and really clear about your approach, of course. It must draw on synthesized evidence and use that to appropriately support any claims you have. It must show an appreciation for the nuance within each prompt, or the sources as well that you include, by exploring some of those complexities found in the concepts of these issues, whilst also making a really clear argument, because it is an assessment, or it is an essay, and that's its nature. Engaging in that nuance should also make sure that you, or any argument that you develop, is not kind of superficial, as this kind of states what we really want you to be thoughtful about this task. So diving into some of that nuance will kind of guarantee that. This essay must draw from 1 to 2 examples, and whilst this might seem maybe a bit annoying to some of you, examples are actually a really great way to communicate ideas and focus your scope. So don't underestimate them, I suppose. You have to do it anyway, so maybe just really consider what examples could I use to really help me complete this assessment and complete it well as well. And the last point, so integrate some in-class work into the essay, basically means you need to use the tasks from the tutorials in this assessment, or from the short tasks that we have done. So this is why for some of those prompts I mentioned how you could add to your existing notes from on another concept for this assessment. So, applying concepts of grief to the bushfire survivors that we looked at, just outlining, what your notes were from the class, and then adding on to that debate with this extra level you're exploring with concepts in this assessment. And that's just an example. If you liked a short task a lot, or you really liked an example that we covered in class, same thing. You can just connect that to one of the prompts and then apply concepts that you think are linked to it. These are just some general details about the assessment. I don't believe I really need to go over them. Something that isn't mentioned in this outline, however, but is a standard for this course, is the use of AI. I have made an announcement about the expectations and posted some resources for you, so please look at those if you are considering using AI for this assessment. You can use AI, but it just has to be within those kind of steps and rules outlined already. This is just that pass-fail component of the assessment rubric, which is really straightforward. And I suppose I just wanted to point out with the rubric, and this I think goes for all rubrics really, there are always key words used in the rubric that kind of tell you exactly what you need to do for a good mark. So try to pay attention to those. For example, critically discuss the contested nature of scholarship rather than just demonstrating accurate communication of the readings and concepts. You can see those specific words indicating to you what will get you those extra marks. I tend to, or at least when I was a student, I tended to read what a credit is for each section of the assessment, and then read what a HD is and compare the language to clearly understand what will get me those extra marks. Just wanted to clearly mention as well that APA referencing is required in this assessment as well. Now for just some general resources I thought might help. I always find it helpful to remind myself of the purpose of an activity and the foundational steps of it. So this first link in this slide goes over the reasons we actually write essays, compared to a literature review or a thesis or something, and clear steps to get you started as well. The next links, like I said before, are resources for writing in first person. The first link is actually kind of goes over effective ways to avoid writing in first person, and I included that to show you examples of when you don't need to use first person. Again, just because it's allowed doesn't mean you should use it all the time, I suppose, in your assessment. So first person writing doesn't always strengthen a paper, so you do have to be specific when you use it, or particular when you use it. The second link here in that section, or third link, in the whole slide, whilst a little wordy, has examples of when first person writing can actually strengthen an assessment, particularly kind of using it to support your argument within essays. So sometimes sharing, personal convictions does actually add credibility rather than taking it away in an argumentative format. Just some other general tips I thought were worth mentioning. You don't have to write 3 paragraphs like you did in school. You can, of course, but an essay just needs to be structured in a way that makes sense for the purpose of the paper. So structure it in whatever way will strengthen and support your argument or your paper topic. It doesn't matter. You probably already know that, but I always found that helpful to be reminded that it doesn't need to be 3 strict paragraphs. If that doesn't work for what you're trying to achieve, it can be 5 paragraphs, it can be 2 paragraphs, doesn't matter. Read your literature. So I know that's, of course, a bit of a duh, but I'm still really guilty of this. I wonder why it's so hard for me to write a literature review when I've only read maybe half of the important documents that I'm discussing. Of course, if you know the literature, you can write about it. It's kind of simple as that, but it's something that we do often not do, surprisingly. So also as well, try to avoid too many quotes. You don't need them unless you can't describe it in another way than how the original text has done it, or you think that a quote will add to the argument, like this important person specifically said this about something that I want to say as well. Otherwise, I just recommend no quotes. And again, don't panic. Read the rubric, read the must list for this assessment, pick a prompt you like, think about how you want to do it, set up some steps maybe, and you will be absolutely able to complete this essay easily. As well, make sure you email me or Denise or Anton if you have any other questions, and we will see you in class. Bye.